A dying billionaire refuses treatment, ready to surrender to grief, until a fearless, no-nonsense doctor risks everything to save him. What begins as a medical standoff becomes an unexpected fight for love, healing, and a second chance at life. The early morning fog curled around the Drake estate like a shroud, thick and uninviting. Nestled high in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the mansion was a fortress of glass and stone, modern, stark, and cold, reflecting the mood of the man who lived inside it. The gravel driveway stretched out like a tongue, winding away from the gate that no longer opened for visitors. It hadn't in months. Inside, Andrew Drake sat by the grand window of the study, a cup of untouched black coffee cooling on the mahogany table beside him. He didn't drink it anymore. It was more a habit of muscle memory than taste. He was 40 but looked older in the morning light. His skin looks dull, almost translucent against the black cashmere robe he wore like armor. The silence in the house was his closest companion. He stared out at the mist-covered valley below, the same view that once filled him with ambition and pride. Now it mocked him. The empire he'd built, Drake Tech, had become a global name in clean energy and AI. Forbes had labeled him the architect of the future a decade ago. But time had done what no competitor could. It had beaten him. His chest ached. Not a sharp, stabbing pain, but a steady, nagging pressure. It came and went like an unwelcome guest. His doctors had names for it: restrictive cardiomyopathy, progressive degeneration, and high risk of sudden cardiac arrest. But Andrew didn't care about the names. The end result was the same. His heart was failing, and he was ready to let it. His assistant, Alan, entered quietly, tablet in hand. "They're asking again," Alan said gently. "The doctors from Johns Hopkins. They've requested another consult. One of them flew in last night." Andrew didn't look away from the window. "Did they bring a coffin, too? Might save them the trouble." Alan gave a sigh, too tired to argue. This wasn't the first time. Dozens of renowned specialists had tried to intervene. All had been dismissed, some politely, others less so. Andrew had signed every form. Do not resuscitate. No surgical intervention. Palliative care only. "You know this condition is treatable," Alan tried again, cautious but firm. "It's not hopeless, Andrew." There's still nothing," Andrew cut in, his voice sharp enough to draw blood. He turned then, his pale eyes locking on Alan. "Hope is for people with something left to live for." Alan bit his tongue. He wanted to shout that Andrew did have something. His company, his foundation, a world still eager to hear from him. But they both knew that wasn't what Andrew meant. Her name was still on the documents in the safe. Camille Drake. His wife. His anchor. His ruin. It had been 5 years, but the pain hadn't dimmed. Her death in a private jet crash over the Rockies had destroyed what little remained of Andrew's soul. The media frenzy had only added gasoline to the fire. Every tabloid, every news alert, every grotesque headline. Billionaire's wife lost in snowstorm tragedy. They'd picked her story apart like vultures. He had buried her in a private ceremony no one attended, not even Alan. He hadn't spoken about her since. "I'm not afraid of dying," Andrew said quietly now, looking back out into the fog. "I'm afraid of staying alive." Alan swallowed. "Then why not just end it?" Andrew glanced at him. There was no anger in his eyes. Just exhaustion. "Because I'm not a coward," he said simply. "And I don't want to give them the satisfaction. The board, the vultures, the investors who think I'll sell. I'll die on my terms. Slowly. Quietly. And they'll get nothing." Silence thickened between them. Alan placed the tablet down gently on the table. "There's one more doctor," he said. "Different from the rest. She doesn't take no for an answer." Andrew raised an eyebrow, the smallest flicker of curiosity. "She, Dr. Lillian Hart. Cardiothoracic. Clean record. Brilliant. Disciplinary for speaking her mind too often. Some say she's difficult." A cold smirk tugged at Andrew's lips. "Difficult women tend to die young in my world." "She's not here to flatter you," Alan said. "She's here because she's your last chance, even if you don't want one." Andrew rose from his chair slowly, the weight of his body fighting him. He walked over to the fireplace and placed a hand on the cold stone mantel. The portrait of Camille still hung above it, her eyes forever frozen in laughter. "Fine," he said at last. "She gets 1 day. Not a minute more." Alan nodded. "I'll arrange it." As the assistant turned to leave, Andrew's voice stopped him. "Make sure she's not pretty." Alan paused at the door. "Why?" "Because if she's pretty and tries to save me, I might start believing life's worth it again." The helicopter landed with precision on the designated pad at the far end of the Drake Estate's grounds. Wind tore through the tall pines as rotors kicked up dry leaves and dust, coating the sleek glass windows of the mansion in a fine film. The descent of the chopper felt less like an arrival and more like an incursion, a surgical strike into hostile territory. Dr. Lillian Hart stepped out onto the concrete, coat flapping against her legs, jaw clenched in silent assessment of her surroundings. She wasn't intimidated by estates or men who built them. She'd faced enough egos, billionaires, and bureaucrats in her 7-year career to know that power often made people soft in the mind but hard in the heart. Andrew Drake, however, was rumored to be the opposite, sharp-minded, emotionally dead. Lillian adjusted the strap of her leather bag over one shoulder, pulling her long, dark hair into a clean twist as she approached the stone steps. Her boots made no sound on the polished floor as the door opened for her, unlocked by Alan himself. "Dr. Hart," he greeted, eyeing her warily. "Thank you for coming." "Not here for pleasantries," she said curtly, stepping past him. "Where is he?" Alan blinked, mildly thrown by her briskness. "The study. He's expecting you." Lillian's boots echoed now, clicking on the marble as she moved down a long corridor lined with abstract paintings and silence. The house was quiet, not peaceful quiet, but unnaturally so. It was the kind of quiet that clung to grief, the kind that vibrated just beneath the skin. She could feel it already. This wasn't just a man unwilling to live. This was a man who'd already died, waiting for his body to catch up. She found him standing near the fireplace when she entered the study, back to her, staring at the portrait above the mantel. His frame was lean, tall, commanding even in stillness. He didn't turn when she stepped inside. "You're prettier than I told him to send," he said without introduction. Lillian didn't pause. "And you're older than your files suggest. Good to know we're both disappointed." That made him turn. Andrew Drake's gaze swept over her like a scanner, efficient, unreadable. His eyes calm, but not indifferent. He wore an immaculately tailored black shirt, loose at the collar, sleeves pushed up. His arms were corded with lean muscle, remnants of a man who once cared about health and form. His expression, however, was pure arrogance. "Dr. Lillian Hart," he said, gesturing lazily to the chair across from him. "The last white knight they've sent up the hill." Lillian remained standing. "Let's not waste time with performances. I'm here to assess your condition, not cater to your attitude. I reviewed your scans on the flight. If you don't allow intervention soon, you'll suffer progressive heart failure. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Within weeks." He smiled faintly. "I know. And you're fine with that?" she asked. "I welcome it." Lillian walked over to the nearby table and set down her bag. She pulled out a file, placed it gently in front of him. It contained detailed charts, EKG results, and multiple images of his degenerating heart tissue. "You have something rare, a condition that responds well to early surgical intervention and controlled treatment. The statistics are on your side. You could live another 20 years. "I don't want 20 years, he replied, sitting down at last. "I don't want one." Lillian sat across from him, folding her hands neatly. "Then why not go ahead and die? Why wait?" Andrew blinked. She had said it calmly. Not as a threat, not as sarcasm. It was a surgical strike of logic, not emotion. He leaned forward slightly, intrigued. "That's a cold thing for a doctor to say." "It's a cold thing to let yourself rot alive because you're too scared to fight," she said. Something flickered in his gaze, just for a second. "You're not like the others," he murmured. "No," she agreed. "They were trying to save Andrew Drake. I'm not. I'm trying to save a heart. The man attached to it is your problem." He laughed, the sound dry and short. Do you really think you can shame me into living? I don't care if you live, she said bluntly. Not unless you want to. But if you think I'm going to stand here while you waste the one body millions of others would kill to have, then yes, I'll shame you, cut you, and drag you into the operating room myself. He leaned back, studying her now as if she were a chess piece he hadn't anticipated. Lillian stood. I'll be staying for 1 day. In that time, I'll monitor your vitals and speak with the estate's in-house medical staff. If by the end of that day you still want to die, I'll leave, and you'll never see me again. And if I change my mind, she looked at him, unblinking. Then you fight, and I fight with you. Andrew's eyes dropped to the file in front of him. The charts glared up at him, lines and data that didn't lie. It wasn't that he didn't believe her. He knew she was right. But something about the way she spoke unsettled him. Not because she was trying to convince him. Because she wasn't. Very well, Dr. Hart, he said finally. 1 day. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Don't mistake silence for weakness, Mr. Drake. I don't speak to fill the room. I speak to fill the void people like you leave behind when they give up. Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing into the depths of the mansion. Andrew remained seated, fingers tapping slowly against the edge of the table. For the first time in months, his chest hurt in a way that wasn't physical. And he wasn't sure if he hated her for it or wanted more. The morning arrived like a slap to the face, brutal, bright, and uninvited. Lillian was already awake before the sun broke through the clouds, dressed in a crisp navy blouse and tailored slacks. No makeup, no jewelry, no softness. She tied her hair back into a high knot, slipped on her watch, and reviewed Andrew's overnight vitals from the private in-house system linked to his biometric bed monitors. Heart rate, irregular. Blood pressure, low but stable. Sleep quality, poor. She wasn't surprised. She made her way to the kitchen, greeted by Alan with a polite nod. He handed her a mug of coffee and a wordless update, his way of saying good luck without using the phrase. The household staff kept their distance. They were used to silence, used to Andrew's moods, his outbursts, his disappearing acts. By 7:03 a.m., Lillian was at his door. She knocked once, firmly. Go away, came the voice from inside. She opened the door anyway. Andrew was in bed, propped up with a book open in one hand, glasses resting on the bridge of his nose. He looked like a man caught pretending to be functional. The book was upside down. Get dressed, she said. He looked up. I told you yesterday. I'm not interested in going anywhere. I didn't say we're going anywhere, Lillian replied. I said get dressed. He marked the page, closed the book, and set it aside. Do you talk to all your patients like this? Only the ones playing chicken with death. He stared at her for a moment, then slowly pulled himself out of bed. She noticed how carefully he moved, like he wasn't sure his body would cooperate. The frailty beneath his arrogance was more telling than anything he'd said so far. By 7:30 a.m., he was seated on the examination bench in his private medical suite. Lillian stood across from him, setting up the portable ultrasound. Her demeanor was unchanged, clinical, efficient, and cool. She didn't flirt. She didn't smile. She didn't play to his ego. He hated that it worked. You know, he said as she applied the gel to his chest, most people would be honored to treat me. You seem annoyed. I'm not impressed by names, she replied without looking at him. They don't keep your heart beating. Her hands moved the probe across his chest. She studied the screen in silence. Andrew broke it. You ever lose a patient, Dr. Hart? Yes. How did it feel? She stopped, eyes flickering toward his face. Like I failed, even if they were already dying? Especially then. Their eyes met, the air between them thickening with an emotion neither wanted to name. For a moment, Andrew's mouth parted, like he might say something real. Then he closed it again, retreating behind the smirk. Maybe you're not as cold as you pretend to be. Lillian wiped the gel from his chest. And maybe you're not as brave as you pretend to be. The probe clicked off. She handed him a fresh shirt. He didn't reach for it. You don't know anything about me, he said quietly. Lillian folded her arms. You're right. I don't know what you've lost. But I know this. People don't choose death unless they think there's nothing left worth feeling. Which means something hurt you deep enough to erase everything else. Andrew's jaw tightened. And you think you're going to fix that with a surgery? He asked, voice laced with sarcasm. No, she said. I'm going to fix your heart. What you do with it after is your choice. He stood then slowly, the shirt still in his hand. You can't force someone to want to live. I don't have to, she said, stepping closer. But I can remind you how much it hurts not to. For the first time, there was no challenge in his eyes. Just a quiet, cautious curiosity. She saw it, the fracture. It lasted 3 seconds. Then the mask returned. Thank you for the lecture, doctor. It was almost inspiring. She stepped away, unfazed. Rest for an hour. I'll return with a preliminary treatment plan. Whether you take it or not is on you. She left him standing there shirtless, the echo of her words hanging heavier than any diagnosis. Back in her room, Lillian shut the door behind her and leaned against it for just a moment. Just long enough to feel the emotional weight settle on her spine. This wasn't just another difficult patient. This was a man fighting against being saved. And she was a woman who didn't know how to give up. The storm arrived just after midnight. Thunder rolled through the valley like a low growl, rattling the windows of the estate. Rain lashed against the glass walls, casting streaks of silver down the sleek surfaces of Andrew Drake's fortress. The house, so used to silence, now breathed in rhythm with the storm. Lillian sat in the upstairs library with her laptop open, reviewing Andrew's recent blood work. She was alone again. After her confrontational first full day, he had retreated into quiet compliance, allowing the tests but offering no engagement. No more sharp remarks, no passive aggression. Just stillness. It unsettled her more than his arrogance. The numbers weren't comforting. His heart was weakening faster than projected. The right medications could slow it. Surgery could stabilize it. But he had to choose to live. A knock sounded at the doorframe. She looked up, and there he was. Andrew stood in black slacks and a fitted long-sleeved shirt, damp from walking down the open corridor that connected his quarters to the library. His eyes shadowed. He looked tired. I can't sleep, he said. Lillian gestured to the chair across from her, without a word. He sank into it slowly, elbows on knees, gaze lowered to the fire burning in the hearth. I used to like the rain, he murmured. Camille hated it. Said it made everything feel like morning. Lillian didn't reply. He'd never said his wife's name out loud before, not to her. She used to run around this house, he said, eyes flickering upward, like she was trying to leave joy in every corner. After she died, it all just stopped. His voice didn't crack. It was too controlled for that. But something in his expression fractured, a soft twitch of the mouth, a subtle tightening of the jaw. I haven't had anyone here since the funeral. Just Alan. Staff. Ghosts. Lillian leaned back. Is that what you've been doing? Living with ghosts. I'm not living, he said, a sad smile pulling at one corner of his lips. I'm just waiting. Every morning I wake up disappointed I didn't die in my sleep. The admission landed between them like a dropped scalpel. Lillian shut her laptop gently. She studied him for a moment, choosing her words with precision. You're grieving, she said. But you're also punishing yourself. His brow lifted subtly. You've turned your house into a mausoleum. You've denied yourself even the smallest pleasures. Not because you don't deserve them, but because somewhere deep down you think living on is a betrayal. His gaze drifted toward the fire again. Isn't it? No, she said firmly. It's not. People die. But love doesn't. What you had with Camille, she paused, softening her voice, that's still in you. But you're burying it under bitterness. He didn't speak for a while. The storm raged on, battering the glass. Finally, he looked at her, really looked at her. What about you? He asked. What are you burying? Lillian tensed. She hadn't expected the question. Not from him. He waited. She stood slowly, moving toward the bookshelf. Her fingers traced the spines absent-mindedly as she answered. My father was a physicist. My mother a teacher. When I told them I wanted to be a surgeon, they said it was a man's field. Cold. Unwomanly. Her lips twisted. When I got into Johns Hopkins, they told me I was sacrificing my femininity. I didn't speak to them for 7 years. Andrew's eyes followed her. I spent most of my 20s in hospitals, pushing myself to the brink. I don't know how to love slowly, or live softly. I only know how to fight. She turned back toward him. And people like me, we don't usually get asked how we feel. Silence. Not empty, but full, dense with unspoken understanding. He stood suddenly and crossed to the bar at the side of the room. Without asking, he poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed one to her. I'm not supposed to drink on my meds, he said. But then again, I'm not taking them. She took the glass, raising an eyebrow. That explains the sarcasm. Your brain's starved for dopamine. They both chuckled, lightly, unexpectedly. He sat down again. Why do you care so much, Lillian? Her name from his lips caught her off guard. It sounded strange. Personal. She stared into the amber liquid before answering. Because I've spent my life trying to keep people alive. And I'm tired of watching them give up. Their eyes locked. Something shifted. Not attraction, not yet, but recognition. Like 2 warriors on opposite sides of a battlefield who suddenly realize they're fighting the same war. Then a sharp pain twisted across Andrew's face. He winced, hand pressing to his chest. Lillian was on her feet in an instant, setting her glass down. Where? She asked, crouching in front of him. Left side. Radiating down the arm, he gritted out. She nodded. On a scale of 1 to 10? 7, he hissed. She helped him breathe, checked his pulse. Too fast, irregular. The episode passed within a few minutes, but it was a warning flare. Next time it could be worse, she said as he sat back, wiping sweat from his brow. You know that. He looked at her then, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. And then quietly he asked, Will you stay? Tonight. Lillian hesitated. Not because of impropriety, but because of everything it meant. I'll stay close, she said, her voice soft. Not because you need me, but because you finally want someone to. And for the first time since she arrived, Andrew didn't argue. He just nodded, barely, and sat in silence while the storm finally began to break. The storm was gone by morning, leaving a wet sheen over the estate. Mist hovered above the treetops, the sky painted in soft grays. Inside, the mansion was quiet again, but the silence had changed. It was no longer hollow. It was expectant. Andrew woke in the reclining chair by the library's fireplace, covered in a thick throw blanket. A second blanket rested nearby, folded and used. A small medical bag sat beside it, sealed and ready. Lillian had stayed. She'd slept upright on the opposite couch, still dressed, her head tilted back against the cushion, her breathing slow and even. He studied her for a moment before rising carefully, so as not to wake her. But she stirred anyway. Her eyes opened, alert immediately. Years of hospital nights had trained her body not to fully rest. You should have slept in your bed, she said groggily. You were here, he replied, stretching. Didn't feel right. She sat up, running a hand through her hair. How are you feeling? Still alive, he said. Surprisingly. She stood, grabbing her bag. Let's do vitals. If they've improved, I'll start you on the oral meds. Low dose, short-acting. No pressure. He watched her move around him, efficient as always. But something about her felt different this morning. Softer at the edges. Less guarded. When she pressed the stethoscope to his chest, her brow furrowed. Your rhythm's steadier. I haven't done anything different, he said. She glanced up. You had a conversation. That's more than you've done in months. Are you implying that talking to you fixed my heart? I'm implying that loneliness is a disease, and you're chronically infected. That earned a real smile from him. Tired but genuine. As she packed up her tools, Andrew walked toward the tall windows that lined the study. The morning sun was just beginning to filter through the trees, casting golden light across the floor. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching the world wake up. I used to believe that love was a distraction, he said. An indulgence. Lillian looked at him from across the room, unmoving. Then Camille happened. And suddenly, I was designing solar towers in the shape of her favorite wildflowers and skipping shareholder meetings to take her hiking. He turned slowly. She made me human. And when she died, I forgot how to be one. Lillian set her bag down. She approached carefully, her steps light. You didn't forget, she said. You just refused to try again. Their eyes met. Neither looked away this time. You make it hard not to try, he said, voice low. Lillian's breath caught. The moment stretched. Then, softly, like peeling gauze from a wound, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't stop him. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel his breath. Close enough that logic began to unravel. I'm breaking every rule by even thinking about this, she whispered. Then let's stop thinking. And then he kissed her. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't wild. It was deliberate, measured like the man himself, but trembling at the edges. A man remembering how to feel. A woman remembering what it meant to let someone in. Her hand came up to his chest, half to push him away, half to anchor herself. She didn't push. When they pulled apart, Lillian's eyes searched his. I shouldn't have let that happen, she said, breathless. But you did. She turned away, pacing once, twice. This crosses a line, Andrew. If anyone finds out, I'm not asking you to compromise your career, he said, voice steady. I'm asking you to be honest. With yourself. With me. With this. Lillian's hands curled into fists at her sides. I've worked my entire life for credibility, she said. For control. I don't get to have the luxury of being reckless. You didn't kiss me like it was reckless, he said quietly. You kissed me like you've been waiting for someone to see you. That hit her like a pulse beneath her ribs. I need air, she said. She stepped onto the terrace, letting the cool wind bite at her skin, hoping it would clear the heat from her chest. Andrew didn't follow. He stayed inside, watching her, letting her breathe, letting her choose. Later that afternoon, she met with Alan in the estate's east wing. I need to file an updated status report, she told him. His condition's stable. His heart's responding to rest, low stress, and minimal medication. If we can schedule surgery within the next 2 weeks, the risk drops by 30%. Alan nodded. And his willingness? Lillian hesitated. He's considering it. Alan studied her face. And you? She met his eyes without flinching. I'm still here, aren't I? He didn't ask more. But his silence held more knowledge than words could. By the time the sun set, Andrew was back in the library, watching the clouds roll in again. Lillian entered, clipboard in hand. I've written up a formal plan, she said. Pre-op conditioning, minor medication, surgical window. You can review it tonight. He didn't take it. Instead, he said, what happens after? She frowned. After the surgery? After I live. Lillian didn't answer right away. Because that answer was the one she didn't want to give. Not yet. Not when everything felt like it could collapse with a single step forward. The house began to change before Andrew did. First, it was the music. One morning, Alan walked into the kitchen to find soft jazz playing over the in-ceiling speakers. Music that hadn't echoed through the halls since Camille was alive. Later that week, sunlight poured through newly opened curtains. The once dusty conservatory had been unlocked and filled with fresh orchids. Staff who used to tiptoe now walked with lighter steps. The house, like its owner, was slowly remembering how to live. But the real change was subtler. Andrew Drake was becoming a man again. He took his medications without resistance. He tolerated check-ins without biting sarcasm. He walked the grounds daily, moving through the morning mist like a figure returned from the dead. His appetite returned. His tone softened. He stopped asking to die. And through it all, Lillian watched carefully. She adjusted his dosages, guided his routine, monitored every beat of his heart, and tried desperately to keep her own out of the equation. They hadn't kissed again. Not once. Not even when their hands brushed during his physical therapy, or when their conversations slipped from clinical to personal in the quiet evenings. She held the line. She reminded herself every day "You're his doctor." Not his escape. But the line was blurring. Because Andrew wasn't just recovering. He was waking up. He began reading again, first with business journals, then novels. He revisited designs for solar grid expansions. He started responding to old emails, reclaiming his voice in the company he had abandoned. One night, Lillian passed the study and saw him at the grand piano, fingers hesitating over the keys before playing a quiet, broken melody. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when he finally looked up and saw her, he smiled. Not a mask. Not a weapon. A real smile. One evening, she found him in the kitchen baking, which seemed so absurd she had to lean on the counter to stop from laughing. "I needed to measure something that obeys the laws of physics," he explained, cheeks flushed with flour and embarrassment. "Medicine doesn't count. You lot just stab in the dark and call it precision." "Cooking is chemistry," Lillian teased. "And if you mess it up, it kills you slower than I do." He handed her a spoonful of dough. She tasted it. "Needs salt," she said. He arched a brow. "Did you just insult my comeback recipe? Your heart's healing. Not your ego." They both laughed. And this time, it didn't feel borrowed from another life. It felt like the beginning of one. But not everything was healing. Lillian was avoiding something. Andrew could feel it. At night, she grew quiet. During checkups, she kept conversation clipped. When he asked her about her life outside of medicine, she deflected. He wondered if she was afraid of falling into something neither of them were ready for. Or worse, something she couldn't afford to want. She was always professional, always careful, until one morning, he caught her standing alone in the library, holding a photo of Camille. "You look like you loved her," she said, not turning around. "I did. And you still do. I always will." She finally faced him. "Then how do I stand here and pretend like I'm not replacing someone?" Andrew's voice was gentle, but unwavering. "You're not replacing her." She didn't speak. "You're saving someone she once loved," he continued. "Not from death, but from becoming a shadow of the man she knew." Lillian swallowed hard. Her eyes burned, but she blinked it away. "That's not the kind of thing you say to your doctor." "It's not," he agreed. "But it is something I'd say to the woman who brought me back." Silence stretched between them. Then Lillian broke it. "I'm afraid of what happens when this is over." "You mean when I live?" She nodded. "When you don't need me anymore." Andrew stepped closer. "I needed a doctor when I was dying," he said. "But I need you because I'm living." Her breath caught again. But still, she didn't move forward. She didn't step back. And Andrew, to his credit, didn't push. Instead, he simply added, "I'm having Alan set up a video call with the board. I want my company back." Lillian blinked. "Seriously?" He nodded. "And I want to reopen the foundation. Shift our focus to medical access. Ethical reform. Surgeons who take risks for the right reasons." Her gaze lifted. "You mean surgeons like me?" He smiled faintly. "Exactly like you." That night, she wrote in her journal. She didn't often write about patients. But Andrew wasn't just a patient. He was a man who had once chosen to die, and was now asking the world for permission to live again. And she wasn't sure if she had saved him, or if they were saving each other. It happened faster than anyone expected. One moment, Andrew was preparing to announce his return to the board of Drake Tech. The next, Lillian's world was collapsing in a storm of headlines, scandal, and scrutiny. The first article hit the news feeds at 6:12 a.m. Billionaire Andrew Drake secretly treated off-grid by rogue surgeon. Ethics violation or emotional entanglement. Within hours, it was everywhere. Media outlets, gossip blogs, financial newsletters. Photos of Lillian entering and leaving the estate. Paparazzi shots zoomed in from helicopters. Leaked reports showing she had treated Andrew without formal hospital oversight. One article included a blurry still from security footage. Andrew and Lillian in the conservatory, too close, too intimate. And worst of all, an anonymous hospital insider had spoken to the press. She violated protocol. There was a DNR order in place, and she overruled it. She should lose her license. Lillian found out at the same time Andrew did. Alan burst into her room with a tablet in hand, jaw tight. They found out, he said. Lillian read in silence, each line cutting deeper than the last. By the time she looked up, Andrew was already storming into the room, barefoot and livid. Tell me you didn't talk to anyone, he said to Alan. I didn't. Then how did they? I'm a doctor, Andrew, Lillian said quietly, setting the tablet down. I have enemies. Colleagues who resent me. One of them must have tipped the media. He looked at her, and for a moment, just a moment, there was something helpless in his eyes. They're going to ruin you for this, he said. Lillian nodded once. I know. The call came that evening. Dr. Hanley, the hospital's chief of staff. Dr. Hart, he said over the phone, his voice grave. You are under official investigation for ethical misconduct and unauthorized high-risk intervention. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all medical practice until review. I understand, Lillian replied, calm but cold. This is serious, Hanley added. They're talking revocation. Lawsuits. You should lawyer up. She didn't say anything. What was there to say? After the call, she sat in silence in her room, staring out at the mountains. The estate felt too large, too loud, too unreal. Andrew knocked once before stepping in. Lillian. She didn't turn. They're going to destroy everything I've built, she said. Not just my career. My name. Everything I fought for. I'll fix it. She laughed bitter low. You can't buy back my license, Andrew. No, he said, stepping closer. But I can tell the truth. Publicly. She turned, eyes flashing. Don't. Why? Because if you go in front of the media, they'll twist it. They'll say I manipulated you. Took advantage. Slept with you to advance my reputation. Then I'll tell them I kissed you first, he said. Lillian stared at him. That's not the point. No, he said. The point is I lived, because you did what no one else had the courage to do. You broke the rules to save a man who didn't want to be saved. You saw past the money, the name, the reputation, and treated the dying part of me. Silence. Then he said softly, Let me speak. 2 days later, the press conference was arranged, against every legal advisor's recommendation. Andrew stood at the podium, dressed in a charcoal suit, no tie, no filter. I was dying, he began, voice steady. And I wanted to die. I refused treatment. I pushed away doctors, friends, and any chance of recovery. He looked directly at the cameras. Then Dr. Lillian Hart walked into my home, into my life, and refused to let me give up. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters scribbled furiously. She risked her career. Her name. She violated protocol not out of negligence, but out of courage. Because she believed something no one else did, that my life was still worth saving. He paused. And she was right. More flashes. Murmurs. Whispers of did he just admit? I stand here today not just as a man who recovered, but as a man who remembers how to live. That is because of her. And if the medical board punishes her for that, then the system is broken beyond saving. The video went viral within hours. The backlash against the hospital was immediate and brutal. Public petitions, online protests, opinion pieces titled Hero or Scapegoat, and When Ethics Get in the Way of Humanity. Donations poured into the foundation Andrew had re-established, this time with a new name. The Heartdrake Initiative for Medical Integrity. But the fight wasn't over. 3 days after the conference, Lillian sat before the medical review board, hands folded, face composed. The verdict, suspension lifted. Record under internal review. No revocation. Warning issued. It wasn't a full pardon, but it wasn't destruction either. When she stepped out of the hearing room, Andrew was waiting. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms. And, for the first time, she let herself fall into them. That night, on the terrace overlooking the lights of the valley, Lillian stood beside Andrew, a glass of wine in her hand. I'm not a symbol, she said quietly. You're not, he replied. You're the reason I'm still breathing. She looked at him. I didn't do this for love. I know, he said, but I'm still in love with you. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. 2 months passed. The estate had transformed. Gone were the shadows and silence. The halls echoed with music again, sometimes jazz, sometimes Andrew's hesitant piano melodies. Art that had been boxed away for years now adorned the walls. The garden Camille once designed had been revived, with Lillian adding her own touches, structured, vibrant living. Andrew Drake was no longer dying. The surgery had gone smoothly. A team of hand-selected surgeons, each personally approved by Lillian, operated under her guidance. Andrew came out of the procedure groggy, bruised, and annoyed at being fussed over. But he survived. More than that, he recovered. Every day afterward was a quiet miracle. His body had healed. But his heart, that was different. Because some things don't just heal. Some things awaken. It was a Tuesday when he finally said the words she hadn't let herself hope for. Not because they were unexpected, but because they felt inevitable. They were sitting on the balcony, warm tea in hand, wrapped in throes as the sun dipped over the mountains. Lillian had her hair down for once, and her head resting against the back of the chair. "I used to think love was something fragile," he said. "Something that once broken, couldn't be rebuilt." She glanced over at him, waiting. "But then you walked in, all sharp words and no patience for my nonsense. You didn't try to love me. You just fought me. And somehow, in the middle of that war, I remembered how to feel again." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small box. He didn't open it, just held it out to her. Lillian sat up straight, surprised but silent. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said softly. "Not yet. I'm asking if you'd stay. Not as my doctor. Not as my savior. Just as the woman who makes my heart beat in ways medicine never could." Her hands trembled as she took the box. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a key to the newly opened Heartdrake Medical Initiative headquarters downtown, her name carved into the glass doors. She blinked back tears. "Are you proposing a future?" "I'm proposing a partnership," he said. "Professionally, emotionally, and maybe someday more." Lillian smiled, slowly, truly. "You still talk too much," she said, voice thick. He leaned closer. "Then shut me up." She kissed him, deep, warm, unhurried. A kiss that didn't come from adrenaline or desperation. This one was real. Grounded. Alive. 6 months later, a press release lit up media networks across the country. Drake Tech founder Andrew Drake funds new medical initiative with former surgeon Lillian Hart, a pledge to change medical ethics and access. Inside the sleek headquarters, Lillian walked the halls in a tailored suit, her badge reading co-director. Andrew often joined her for board meetings, sometimes to advise, other times just to listen. He still teased. She still rolled her eyes. But now they did it hand in hand. They didn't rush into marriage. They didn't need to. They were two people who had met at the crossroads of death and duty, both too broken to ask for love, and yet too brave not to earn it. In a world that had once watched him die, Andrew Drake was now fully, indisputably, legally alive. And beside him stood the woman who made it possible. Not his doctor. Not his cure. His future. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.